Pop, what is this?
It's a piano. Don't you know anything about music?
I know it's a piano.
And why bother to ask?
What happens when you take a 30-second commercial and turn it into a whole TV show? A complete disaster. We're counting down the sitcoms that crashed and burned, from prehistoric cavemen trying to get a mortgage to a show so controversial people protested it before it even hit the air. 1. Cavemen.
I'm a normal guy who makes stupid mistakes. I'm a guy who has a brother and a best friend who can be complete jackasses.
You've probably seen those car insurance commercials from Geico, the ones with the slogan, "So easy, a caveman can do it," which always made a well-dressed caveman angry. Well, back in 2007, some TV executives thought those short little jokes would make a great half-hour sitcom. Spoiler alert, they were very, very wrong. The show was called Cavemen, and it followed 3 prehistoric dudes living in modern-day Atlanta. They had jobs, apartments, and relationship problems, all while dealing with being treated differently because they were, cavemen. The whole idea was supposed to be a clever take on social issues, but it just came across as weird and uncomfortable. The makeup and prosthetics used to make the actors look like cavemen were honestly pretty creepy. Instead of looking funny, they just looked strange. Critics absolutely hated it from the very beginning. One reviewer said it was a one-joke show, and the joke wasn't even funny in the first place. Viewers agreed. The ratings were terrible from the first episode. The network tried to change things around and even swapped out some actors, but nothing could save it. The show was canceled after only 6 episodes aired, leaving a handful of completed episodes to be forgotten forever. It goes down in history as proof that what works in a commercial usually doesn't work as a full series. Basing a show on a commercial is a strange choice for sure. But believe it or not, our next show was based on a real historical person, and its bizarre take on history sparked outrage before anyone even saw it. 2. The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer.
What's your lame excuse this time?
The Civil War, Mary?
The Civil War, what about my needs?
Some ideas for a sitcom are so wild you have to wonder how they ever got approved. Case in point, a show from 1998 called The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer. The title character, whose last name is pronounced Fee-Fair, was a black English nobleman who, through some wacky events, ends up becoming the butler for President Abraham Lincoln in the White House. The show tried to be a goofy, over-the-top comedy about the inner workings of the Lincoln administration. It portrayed the famous president as a clumsy, clueless guy who was always getting into trouble. Now, you might already be seeing the problem here. Making a silly comedy set during the Civil War, one of the most serious times in American history, was a bold choice. But the biggest issue for many people was the idea of making jokes about that period from the perspective of a black butler serving a white president. Before the show even aired, protest groups and historical associations spoke out against it. They felt it was making light of a very painful part of history. The creators insisted they were not making fun of anything serious, but the damage was done. When the show finally premiered, the ratings were awful. People were either offended by the concept or just didn't find it funny. It was canceled after only 4 episodes, proving that some parts of history are best left out of sitcoms. Making jokes about a beloved president is one thing. But what happens when a show tries to make a comedy out of the single most hated figure in world history? You get a sitcom so shocking it was erased from existence after just 1 episode. 3. Heil, Honey, I'm Home.
You may be big stuff in Germany, but I knew you when you were just a house painter.
Boy, this is going to be some night.
This next one is so unbelievable that it sounds like a joke, but it was a real TV show that actually aired. It's called Heil, Honey, I'm Home, and it is without a doubt one of the most jaw-droppingly bad ideas for a sitcom ever. The show, which was made in the United Kingdom in 1990, was supposed to be a parody of old American sitcoms from the 1950s. The main characters were named Adolf Hitler and Ava Braun. Yes, you read that right. They lived in a nice little suburban apartment, and their wacky next-door neighbors were a Jewish couple named Arnie and Rosa Goldenstein. The plot of the one and only episode that ever aired was about Adolf trying to keep the visiting British Prime Minister from finding out about his loud and nosy Jewish neighbors. The humor was supposed to come from the silly classic sitcom situations clashing with the fact that the main character was, well, Hitler. The creators claimed they were trying to make a statement, but literally no one saw it that way. Everyone who saw it was just horrified and confused. How could anyone think this was a good idea? The TV network that aired it was flooded with complaints. They immediately realized they had made a gigantic mistake. They canceled the show right away, and the other completed episodes were never shown to the public. To this day, it stands as the ultimate example of a show that crossed a line nobody even knew existed. That show was a massive disaster because of its subject matter. But our next show was a disaster for a totally different reason. Its budget was so huge and its failure so big that it almost took the entire network down with it. 4. Supertrain. Back in the late 1970s, the TV network NBC was struggling in the ratings. They needed a huge, spectacular hit to bring viewers back. So they decided to pour a ton of money into a show they thought couldn't fail. That show was called Supertrain. The idea was to create a show set on a gigantic high-tech train that was like a cruise ship on rails. This train was nuclear-powered, traveled at 200 miles per hour, and had everything you could imagine inside: a swimming pool, a nightclub, a gym, and fancy dining rooms. Each week, a new set of famous guest stars would get on the train and have some kind of adventure, whether it was a romance, a mystery, or a comedy. The network spent millions and millions of dollars just building the giant model trains for filming. It was one of the most expensive shows ever made at the time. The problem was, all that money on screen couldn't hide the fact that the stories were incredibly boring. The plots were silly, the characters were forgettable, and the whole show felt slow and clunky, which is pretty ironic for a show about a super-fast train. Viewers tuned in for the first episode out of curiosity, but quickly tuned out. The ratings were a catastrophe. NBC lost a massive amount of money on the show, and it became a famous symbol of a Hollywood flop. It chugged along for only 9 episodes before it was sent to the scrapyard for good. A show about a train that failed is pretty funny. But what about a show where the main character wasn't a train, but a car? And not just any car. This car was the main character's mother. 5. My Mother the Car.
It take to convince you it's me, Mom.
You sound like my mother. You can't be. She passed on back in
August 23rd, 1949.
Often, when people make lists of the worst TV shows of all time, one title always comes up: My Mother the Car. The title tells you everything you need to know about this bizarre 1965 sitcom. It's about a man named David Crabtree who goes to a used car lot and discovers a rundown old touring car from 1928. He buys it, only to find out that the car is the reincarnation of his dead mother. That's right, the car talks to him through its radio, and the voice is his mom. Her name was Gladys. Each week, the show followed David's attempts to keep his talking mother car a secret from his confused family, while also protecting her from an evil car collector who wanted to steal her. The show was created by some of the same people who made the hit show Mr. Ed, which was about a talking horse. They probably thought if a talking horse could be a star, why not a talking car? They quickly found out why not. The concept was just too ridiculous for audiences to accept. Critics tore it to shreds, calling it one of the dumbest ideas in television history. Even though people hated it, it somehow managed to stay on the air for a full 30-episode season before being canceled. But its legacy lives on as the ultimate punchline for a truly terrible sitcom idea. Having your mom come back as a car is weird. But our next show features a main character who is not a car, but an animal. And not just any animal, a chimpanzee who was smarter than all the humans around him. 6. Me and the Chimp.
The monkey on the court. Come on, over here. You'll excuse me, won't you? You can be the substitute. I'll let you know if we run out of human beings.
In the early 1970s, there was a belief in Hollywood that adding a cute animal to a show could make it a hit. This led to some strange ideas, but none were stranger than the 1972 sitcom Me and the Chimp. The show was about a dentist named Mike Reynolds who lived with his wife and 2 kids. One day, his kids bring home a chimpanzee named Buttons who has escaped from an Air Force research lab. Mike agrees to let Buttons stay, and the chimp becomes part of the family. The twist was that Buttons was a super chimp. He was incredibly smart and was always trying to be helpful, but he would usually misunderstand human situations and cause total chaos. Each episode would feature Buttons trying to do something simple, like help make dinner or fix a toy, and ending up destroying the house in the process. The family would then have to clean up his mess and try to explain what happened to their confused neighbors. The show was created by Gary Marshall, the same guy who would later create huge hits like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. But this was one of his earliest projects, and it was a total misfire. The jokes were silly and repetitive, and the sight of a grown man yelling at a chimpanzee in a diaper just wasn't that funny. Audiences were not interested, and the show was canceled after only 13 episodes. A show about a chimp causing trouble is a pretty silly idea. But what if you took a silly idea and combined it with outer space? You'd get our next show, a sci-fi comedy so bad that its title became a joke itself. 7. Homeboys in Outer Space.
Oh man, we're gonna die. We're gonna die. Look, Morris. They got lasers and photon torpedoes and they got those sparkly little lights that go woo!
Sometimes a TV show's title is so bad that you know the show is going to be a flop before you even see it. That's exactly what happened with Homeboys in Outer Space. This 1996 sitcom was about 2 astronauts, Ty and Morris, who fly around the galaxy in the 23rd century in a beat-up spaceship they call the Space Hoopty. They went on adventures, got into trouble, and tried to make a living as freelance space travelers. Their ship was controlled by a sassy female computer voice named Loquacia, pronounced Lo-Quay-Sha. The show was meant to be a goofy parody of sci-fi shows like Star Trek, but with a hip-hop flavor. The problem was, the jokes were just not funny. They were full of tired stereotypes and cliches that felt dated even in the 90s. The show relied on silly catchphrases and loud, over-the-top acting instead of clever writing. Critics absolutely destroyed it. They called it tasteless, unfunny, and one of the worst shows on television. It was created for the UPN network, which was a new network at the time trying to find an audience. They were hoping for a cool, edgy hit. Instead, they got a show that became a national punchline. It was a huge embarrassment for the network and was canceled after just 1 season of 21 episodes, sending these homeboys into a black hole of forgotten television. Bad sci-fi is one thing, but our next show tried to tackle a very real-world issue in the worst way possible, leading to a sitcom that was both offensive and deeply unfunny. 8. Work It.
Sweetie, we're gonna get some lunch. Want to join us?
Who's that woman?
I'll be right there.
And who's that woman?
In 2012, the economy was still recovering, and lots of people were looking for jobs. Someone at ABC thought this would be a great setup for a sitcom. The result was Work It, a show that is remembered as one of the most misguided comedies of the 21st century. The plot was about 2 guys, Lee and Angel, who lose their jobs selling cars. They discover that a pharmaceutical company is hiring sales reps, but the company believes that women are better at the job. So, what do our heroes do? They decide to dress up as women to get hired. They put on dresses, wigs, and makeup and pretend to be ladies at work, then change back into men when they go home to their families. The show was trying to be like classic movies where men dress up as women, such as Tootsie or Mrs. Doubtfire. But it completely missed the mark. The humor was supposed to come from the guys trying to act like women and failing. Instead, it just felt insulting and cringy. The jokes were old and lazy, relying on silly stereotypes. Before the show even aired, people were complaining that the concept was offensive. When it finally premiered, the critics confirmed everyone's fears. It was called painfully unfunny and a train wreck. Viewers stayed away in droves. The show had some of the worst ratings of the year, and ABC pulled the plug after only 2 episodes had aired. A show with an offensive premise is bound to fail. But what about a show from a creator known for offensive humor who somehow managed to make a sitcom that even his fans didn't like? 9th, Dads.
Eli, come to Edna.
Seth MacFarlane is the creator of the huge animated hit Family Guy, a show known for pushing the boundaries with its humor. In 2013, he produced his first live-action sitcom for the Fox network, called Dads. The show was about 2 successful best friends, Eli and Warner, who run their own video game company. Their lives get turned upside down when their annoying and out-of-touch fathers unexpectedly move in with them. Warner's dad is a grumpy pessimist, while Eli's dad is a loud and obnoxious schemer. With Seth MacFarlane's name attached, people expected the show to be edgy and funny. Instead, it was just plain cringy. The show was immediately criticized for its lazy and offensive jokes. In the very first episode, there were jokes that were seen as horrifying, including a scene where the characters had an Asian American employee dress up in a skimpy schoolgirl outfit to impress some clients. Critics and audiences were not impressed. They felt the show was trying way too hard to be shocking without actually being clever or funny. Unlike Family Guy, which often has some smart satire behind its jokes, Dads just felt mean-spirited. Despite the terrible reviews, the network had ordered a full season, so it stuck around for 19 episodes. But the ratings never improved, and it was quietly canceled, becoming a rare miss for the famous producer. Bad taste is one way to get canceled. Another way is to be a spin-off of a hugely popular show that nobody asked for. Our next show was just that, a spin-off so disliked, it became a running joke for decades. 10. Hello, Larry.
Yesterday, Ruthie mentioned that she was interested in music.
2 days ago, she said she wanted to jump out of an airplane. Hope you didn't buy her a parachute.
In the late 1970s and early 80s, one of the most popular sitcoms on TV was Different Strokes. It was a heartwarming show about 2 young black brothers adopted by a rich white millionaire. The show had a bunch of memorable characters, including a guy named Larry Alder, who was a talk show host who appeared in one episode. For some reason, the producers thought this minor, forgettable character deserved his own show. The result was the 1979 sitcom, Hello, Larry. The show followed Larry after he loses his job in Los Angeles and moves to Portland, Oregon, with his 2 teenage daughters to host a radio call-in show. The show was supposed to be about a single dad raising his daughters and giving advice on the radio. But the main problem was that the character of Larry was just not very likable. He was kind of selfish and whiny, and the show's jokes were weak. To try and boost the ratings, the network constantly reminded everyone that it was connected to Different Strokes. They had the characters from the hit show cross over and appear on Hello, Larry all the time. But it didn't work. People loved Different Strokes, but they just didn't care about Larry. The show became a punchline in the industry, a symbol of a failed spin-off. Even Johnny Carson used to make jokes about it on The Tonight Show. It somehow lasted for 2 seasons before it was finally canceled, leaving Larry to say goodbye for good. Trying to spin off a minor character is a risky move. But what if you spin off 2 of the most popular characters from one of the biggest shows ever, and it still fails? That's exactly what happened next. 11. Joni Loves Chachi.
I love you!
I love you. Joni loves Chachi.
If you were a teenager in the 1970s, you loved the show. Happy Days. It was a massive hit about life in the 1950s, and 2 of its most popular characters were Joni Cunningham, Richie's little sister, and her cool, handsome boyfriend, Chachi Arcola. Their romance was a huge storyline on the show, and they even sang duets together. The network figured that these 2 were so popular they could easily carry their own show. So in 1982, they launched the spin-off Joni Loves Chachi. The new show followed the young couple as they moved to Chicago to try and make it as rock stars with their band. On paper, it seemed like a surefire hit. It had 2 beloved characters from a top-rated show. But the magic just wasn't there. When you took Joni and Chachi away from Fonzie, Richie, and the rest of the Happy Days gang, they just weren't as interesting. The show focused heavily on their musical performances, and each episode felt like a mini-musical. But the songs were cheesy and forgettable, and the plots were thin. Viewers who loved them on Happy Days didn't follow them to their new show. The ratings were a huge disappointment. After only 17 episodes, the network pulled the plug. Joni and Chachi then moved right back to Milwaukee and were put back on Happy Days for its final season, as if their Chicago adventure had never even happened. A spin-off of a comedy that fails is common. But our next show was a spin-off of one of the most beloved TV shows of all time, a show that was both a comedy and a drama, and its failure was a massive shock to everyone. 12. After MASH.
Colonel Potter, sir. My last wish is to be buried in my mother's wedding gown.
I've seen these Dodgers for 40 years, all the tricks. Dismissed!
The show MASH was more than just a sitcom. It was a cultural phenomenon. For 11 seasons, millions of viewers tuned in to watch the hilarious and heartbreaking stories of doctors and nurses in the Korean War. The final episode in 1983 was the most watched television episode in American history. So, it's no surprise that the network wanted to keep the magic going. Just a few months after MASH ended, a new show called After MASH premiered. The show followed 3 of the original characters, Colonel Potter, Klinger, and Father Mulcahy, after they returned home from the war and started working together at a veterans hospital in Missouri. The new show had a huge premiere, with tons of people tuning in to see what their favorite characters were up to. The first season actually had pretty good ratings. But people quickly realized that something was missing. The heart and soul of the original MASH was the friendship between all the characters, especially wisecracking heroes like Hawkeye and BJ. Without them, the show felt empty. The stories at the Veterans Hospital were much more serious and less funny than the ones at the old Army Hospital. By the second season, viewers had lost interest. The ratings dropped like a rock. The show that started as a top 10 hit was canceled before its second season was even finished. It proved that sometimes, even with beloved characters, you just can't recapture lightning in a bottle. MASH was a workplace comedy. Our next failure was also a workplace comedy, but instead of a hospital, it was a kitchen, and its famous star learned that cooking on TV is very different from acting on TV. 13. Emerald.
Now we're gonna kick it up a notch and we're gonna add a little cayenne pepper, right? Bam! Just, oh!
In the late 1990s and early 2000s, there was no bigger celebrity chef than Emerald Lagasse. His cooking shows were massive hits. He was famous for his exciting personality, his delicious-looking food, and his famous catchphrases like "Bam" and "Kick it up a notch." He was so popular that the TV network NBC decided to give him his own sitcom. In 2001, the show, simply titled Emeril, hit the airwaves. In it, Emeril played a fictional version of himself, a famous TV chef who also had to deal with his crazy family and the wacky crew of his cooking show. The idea was to blend a family sitcom with a workplace comedy set behind the scenes of a TV show. The problem was, while Emeril was a fantastic chef and a great TV personality, he was not a very good actor. His line delivery was stiff and awkward, and he looked uncomfortable trying to act in scenes with professional actors. The writing didn't help either. The jokes were weak, and the situations felt forced. Critics said that watching the show was like watching a train wreck in a chef's hat. The show was a huge ratings disaster. NBC tried to retool it, changing the cast and the story, but it was no use. They canceled it after only 7 episodes aired, proving that just because you're a star in one field doesn't mean you'll be a star in another. A chef who couldn't act is one thing. But what about a very famous and beloved comedian who tries to make a comeback with a new sitcom, only to see it fail in record time? That's what happened to our next TV flop. 14. The Paul Reiser Show.
What can five guys do? We're not going to get hurt.
Hookers. No, I just want to make sure everyone heard that. Hookers.
Paul Reiser was a huge sitcom star in the 1990s. His show Mad About You, which he co-created and starred in, was a massive success that ran for 7 seasons. It was one of the most popular and beloved comedies of its time. After that show ended, Paul Reiser focused on movies and other projects for many years. But in 2011, he decided to return to television with a new sitcom called The Paul Reiser Show. Just like his old show, this one was based on his own life. He played a semi-fictional version of himself, a successful TV star who is now retired and trying to figure out what to do next while hanging out with his group of friends. The show was supposed to be a look at the funny side of life after fame. It had a similar feel to shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where a comedian plays himself. The network had high hopes for it, but when it premiered, it landed with a thud. The show felt very low energy and, to put it bluntly, boring. The critics found it uninspired, and the jokes felt old and tired. Viewers just weren't interested in watching a famous actor complain about his life with his buddies. The ratings for the first episode were terrible, and for the second episode, they were even worse. The network acted swiftly and brutally. They canceled the show after only 2 episodes had aired, making it one of the fastest TV show failures of all time. A famous comedian's flop is always a surprise, but our next show didn't have one famous star, it had 2, and they were part of a musical act so strange and so bad, their show has become a legend of terrible television. 15. Pink Lady and Jeff.
We wanted to speak perfect English when we got here.
Oh, and you speak English too?
Yes. Do you?
Get ready for one of the weirdest shows in TV history. In Japan, there was a female pop duo named Pink Lady who were incredibly popular. They had a string of #1 hits and were huge superstars. In 1980, some American TV producers decided to bring them to the United States to star in their own variety show. The result was a truly bizarre program called Pink Lady and Jeff. The show starred the 2 singers from Pink Lady, whose names were Me and Kay. The Jeff in the title was a comedian named Jeff Altman, who was their co-host. There was one huge problem. Me and Kay did not speak a single word of English. So, for the entire show, they would just smile and say their lines phonetically, without having any idea what they were saying. Jeff's job was to do comedy sketches and interact with the guest stars, while the ladies would perform their disco pop songs. The whole thing was an awkward, confusing mess. The comedy wasn't funny, and the musical numbers were strange. The language barrier made it impossible for the hosts to have any real chemistry. It was like watching 3 people in 3 different shows at the same time. It was a massive ratings bomb and was canceled after just 5 weeks. It's now remembered as one of the ultimate television train wrecks. A musical show that failed is one thing. But what if you combined a musical with a police drama? You would get one of the most famously bad TV shows ever made, a show so weird it had to be seen to be believed. 16. Cop Rock.
Pop chop, let's see what you got. Gonna be coming for you, ready or not. Tomorrow morning, we're gonna be free.
There are good ideas, there are bad ideas, and then there is Cop Rock. This 1990 show is a legend in the world of television flops. The creator was a very successful and respected TV producer named Stephen Bachko, who had made huge hits like Hill Street Blues and L.A. Law. He decided he wanted to try something completely different. He wanted to make a gritty, realistic police drama, but also have it be a full-blown musical. Yes, a musical where the police officers, criminals, and judges would suddenly break out into song and dance in the middle of a scene. You might have a police chief singing a gospel number about his budget problems, or a jury singing their verdict in harmony. The network, ABC, was so impressed with the creator's track record that they gave him the green light. The show was incredibly expensive to make, with original songs and choreography for every single episode. But when it aired, audiences were just baffled. People who wanted to watch a cop show were annoyed by the singing, and people who liked musicals thought the police stories were too dark. It was a mix that pleased absolutely no one. Critics called it a glorious disaster. The show was canceled after only 11 episodes, and it cost the network a fortune. It remains the ultimate example of a bold experiment that went horribly, horribly wrong. A musical about cops is a wild idea. But our next sitcom had an even wilder premise. It was a comedy set after the end of the world. 17. Whoops.
Where am I? You've passed on, and this is heaven. Really? No, I'm putting you on.
What's the funniest thing you can think of? For the creators of the 1992 sitcom Whoops, the answer was apparently the end of human civilization. The show was a post-apocalyptic comedy. The story begins when two little kids playing with a toy accidentally launch a real-world nuclear missile, which causes a global catastrophe that wipes out almost everyone on the planet. The show then focuses on a small group of 6 survivors who all happen to find each other and end up living together in an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. The survivors included a stuffy intellectual, a free-spirited woman, a greedy corporate guy, and a scientist who feels guilty because he helped build the missiles. They were also joined by a friendly giant who was raised by wolves. The humor was supposed to come from these different personalities clashing as they try to rebuild society from scratch. They would get into silly arguments over who should be the leader or how to find food. The show tried to make light of a very dark situation, but the jokes just felt awkward and out of place. The idea of laughing about the end of the world didn't sit well with viewers. It was a weird, depressing concept for a comedy, and it was quickly canceled after 10 episodes, leaving the survivors to face their fate off the air.